lazily incapable of generating as a result of the kind of erosion of purpose to which people like Mr. Vidal contribute, sometimes eloquently, sometimes not.
I still don't see how Mr. Buckley, with his concerted will, thinks that we're going to win a war that we've spent certainly 5 very aggressive years in losing. We have tried search and destroy. We have dropped more bombs on it than we dropped on Europe in the Second World War. We are getting absolutely nowhere. They have a perfect desire to organize their own country in their own way, and there's no problem about it.
If we turn
we are in the present, however, if I may say so, I would suspect the most war-minded person in the United States. And usually Mr. Buckley doesn't reveal himself as clearly as he has tonight. But indeed, he has come out for a preemptive strike against Red China.
That is an act of war.
No, you came out for it in 1964, December 29th, in the National Review. You do write your own columns,
I said
don't
Mr.
you?
Kennedy in 63. I came out in 1964.
Yes, you were.
He didn't come out for it. He
slow.
considered it in 63.
The difference between consideration and proposing it.
The point is, Mr. Vidal, that there are those people who are always deploring what ought to have been done back when certain other people were saying it should have been done at that moment. Now, one of these days you're going to sit around shaking and talking about better red than dead because Red China has a hydrogen bomb. And the answer will be, who was it who a few years ago thought that might have been the time, as for instance in Munich, to stop appeasement? I don't say that life is going to be completely easy, completely non-dangerous.
We are, however,
very dangerous.
I know
that
there
are very bad people.
I know that you're very interested in Munich and interested in the past, and of course, every decision you would have made correctly had you been asked. Unfortunately, you were not. Everyone you recall, yes. Yeah. Well, somehow the good judgment of the country maintained itself. And here we are today, and you are talking in the vaguest of terms, saying, now we're going to win in Vietnam. Now, I assume that you are for escalation.
I said we could win.
But you said you will. We must.
I said we could, Mr. Vidal.
But you don't. Could we or should we?
Oh, well, obviously, we should.
Aha. Well, that's all we needed to know. Now, here he sits. Take a good look at the leading warmonger in the United States. Bill, don't you point your tongue at me now. Keep it in your cheek where it belongs.
Well, if I'm the leading warmonger in the United States, then I am to be contrasted with you in the sense in which the majority of the people of the United States, including the leadership of the Democratic Party and the leadership of the Republican Party, belong with me, while you go to Rome and expatriate yourself.
I do not. I think we should straighten this out now. I don't expatriate myself. I have an apartment in Rome, and I go there for 2 or 3 months every year to be close to the Vatican, to contemplate William Buckley and his mad activities back here. And with enormous serenity, they're trying to get us, Bill.
Yes, and you published in January of this year in a book the following statement: unless the war in Vietnam is renounced by the next elected president of the United States, I see no moral alternative than to renounce my citizenship, Vidal.
I think you said
shows that we may not have anything to lose at the end of this election.
It may very well be that all that we can earn is our conscience. I must say it must be mysterious to you to find somebody acting out of a moral principle, but after all, sooner or later, we must all be confronted with these Thomas More decisions, and I'm sure that you will settle for Wales and I for the Bach.
The Encyclopedia of Morality, which constitutes your published work, is hardly my primary source.
Do you read?
Mr. Vidal, would it have been possible for any other president to have behaved differently in a decisive way from the way President Johnson did, say, in 1965? We have 2 ex-presidents, one a Republican, one a Democrat, who both say he's right. The dead president said 2 months before his death that he believed in the domino theory and felt that we should not let South Vietnam fall to the communists.
I have a strange feeling that empires have their own built-in dynamism. And you may be right that with the kind of presidents that we tend to have now, who reflect the mood of a country, that it may very well be this empire of ours has been going on since 1899, when we picked, remember, the Maine, which was as phony as the Tonkin Gulf resolution. We've been in the empire business since 1899. We picked a war with Spain. We ended up with the Philippines, which we then liberated against their will and added to our empire. We became a great Pacific power. We tried an invasion of Canada. We tore pieces from Mexico.
With all of history?
I think you could learn a great deal.
I know,
and at the end of it, we are now on the mainland of Asia. And I think, to be perfectly bleak and to be perfectly blunt, I think we're headed for total disaster. This empire, with people like Mr. Buckley here beating the drum, and I think the instinct of the people, I used to think, was for peace. I think it now. I come back and I see the little American flags on the antennae of the car. They're getting ready for a war. They're getting ready for war. So I think probably Lyndon Johnson is simply an agent of nature. That the empire is getting to a point that there's going to be a blow-up, which you can say overpopulation, the ecological balance of the planet is upset, the food supply is endangered. I think there is war coming.
Mr. Smith, this is a recurrent phenomenon. People like to sort of massage their world weariness and tell us how everything is going to the dogs. And there's a curious coincidence about the fact that it's always going to the dogs because we don't do what they tell us to do. Now, I don't know how robust America is, but I'm sure it's robust enough to survive crises in the future. I don't remember any time during the past 20 years when we haven't heard the scare talk. America has about 6 months left to go. The answer is that we have, I think, more than that left to go. Though I do think that there are signs to worry about, but a collection of that kind of syndrome is there. Not in the Democratic platform of tonight.
I must say, 6 months to go, Richard Nixon was the last person to do that in the 1956 election. He said, "We have 1 month to save America," said Richard Nixon.
And we saved it, didn't we?
We got Eisenhower. We got Eisenhower, whom you highly disapproved of. You thought he was.
How do you know we wouldn't have saved it if we hadn't voted for Eisenhower?
I did. Were we saved? No, I don't.
Let me ask you about another part of the Democratic platform, which isn't being debated. The Democrats are in favor of law and justice, where the Republicans are in favor of law and order. Is there any distinction?
Well, there is a metaphysical distinction which I'm sure has not been observed by the people who formulated the policies. A state as defined in the liberal idea is not a state which accepts justice as its primary goal, for the reason that elementary distinctions were made millennia ago between the city of God and the city of man. Now, I grant that the rhetoric of the Democratic Party sometimes seems to give us the impression that it is ushering in the city of God, except that God is unconstitutional. But given that it seems to be trying to go in that direction, the Republican emphasis on law and order is, in my judgment, perhaps for accidental reasons, in closer congruity to the limited aspirations of a constitution of a free republic.
I think Mr. Buckley has very fairly stated, as usual, the viewpoint of the daughters of the American Revolution. In actual fact, the Democratic Party is a little bit ahead of the Republican Party on this particular issue, but the metaphysical point, as Mr. Buckley would say, really is between what do you think about having a strong federal government as opposed to a strong local government? And this is a legitimate and a continuing debate. I would only give you this reminder that without a strong federal government, no school would have even begun to be integrated in the South. There never would have been a pure drug and food act. While we were down there in Miami, I noticed that the Florida Power and Light Company was going to put an atomic reactor in Biscayne Bay, which would have cooked all the fish. Now, the local Chamber of Commerce was a marvelous idea, because anything for money, and the Department of the Interior stopped it. Now, Mr. Buckley, with his laissez-faire love of doing business in the United States, anything that makes money has to be good, that's American, would probably have allowed this. I say that the federal government must act in certain great issues.
Did you follow that one, Smith?
Do you believe
that sounds like one of those orators out there? However, I would transcribe it and study it.
No, I think...
I'm in favor of killing sharks in Biscayne Bay for profit. Is that right?
No, but your people... Oh, Bill, let me tell you, your people are. And the terrible thing about it is that absolutely nothing would ever be done at a local level on something like integrated. You think there would be one integrated school in the South without the Supreme Court decision?
Well, before we had a strong central government, we had a civil war, the purpose of which was to free the slaves. So I think that good things can happen even without federal government. The federal government, which incidentally all of the Democrats are busy apologizing for at this moment. You may have noticed in the platform, they're all saying we've got to retreat, as Senator Kennedy was saying. We've got to retreat from the idea that the federal government can do everything.
No, but they have said the federal government can do everything.
That we conservatives have been saying for quite a while.
No, as a matter of fact, this year's liberal rhetoric has fallen into a conservative trap that we must get private enterprise, that great machine of American virtue, as Richard Nixon said. This alone can help us in the ghettos with the Negroes. Well, private enterprise won't. They'll get the tax cut he promised them. And that'll be the last we hear, because they're there to make money, not to do...
Don't you understand, Mr. Vidal, that the making of money is, according to systems discovered 300 years ago with the beginning of economic liberty, a way of helping people, because it is a way of making goods available to people at a cheaper price. Henry Ford made a lot of money, but he also reduced the price of cars from $5,000 to $500. Got it? Got it?
I would say offhand...
I think this is the last remark. Can you do it in one line?
I would, yes, just simply in one line, that it has been a great pleasure to observe America's leading hawk and great heart with his enormous compassion. Don't stick your tongue out, Bill. Once again, in action.
That was a long line. We must break it off there, and we'll continue tomorrow night.